She attached a beard made of braided goat's hair to her chin with a cord of gold, stood in a hall of stone, and called herself the Son of Ra. Her name was Hatshepsut. She was a woman, and she had just declared herself Pharaoh of Egypt. Settle in for a moment. Let your shoulders drop. The room you're lying in is quiet, and we're going somewhere older than any place you've ever been. Somewhere the air smells like incense and river mud, where the sky at dusk turns the color of hammered copper, and where a story was almost lost forever before it was found again in a wooden box. This was not supposed to happen. In 3,000 years of recorded Egyptian history, the throne had passed from man to man, from father to son or brother to brother, occasionally with the help of intrigue and violence, but always, always in a male body. The very rituals of kingship were built around maleness. The language of rule was carved in masculine forms. Every image, every myth, every relief, cut into every temple wall in the land told the same story. The pharaoh was a man. He was Horus walking the earth. He was the son of the sun. Hatshepsut had grown up knowing all of this. She had been born into it. She had breathed it in every morning from the time she was old enough to walk through the sacred courts of Thebes. She knew what pharaohs were, what they wore, how they moved, what they cost. She had watched her father be one, and then she became one anyway. This is the story of how she did it. It is a story about power and pink granite, and a woman who refused to fit inside the world she'd been handed. It is a story about what happens when authority tries to erase a name and fails. And it is a story that begins, as the best ones often do, not with a throne, but with a child learning the shape of a world she is about to change. The Nile is dark. The desert is still. Let's begin. To understand Hatshepsut, you have to understand the Egypt she arrived in, not the Egypt of the pyramids. That civilization was already ancient history by her time, older to Hatshepsut than the Roman Empire is to us. Not the Egypt of the Old Kingdom. God kings, those immovable stone faces staring into eternity from Giza. The Egypt of Hatshepsut was something newer and noisier and far more politically complicated. It was the New Kingdom, that period beginning around 1550 BCE, when Egypt rose from the trauma of foreign occupation and became, for the first time, something that could fairly be called an empire. For generations before Hatshepsut's birth, the Nile Valley had suffered under the rule of the Hyksos, foreign rulers from Western Asia who had swept into the delta and held northern Egypt in a grip that the native Thebans found both humiliating and intolerable. The expulsion of the Hyksos left a wound that healed into something fierce and ambitious. The 18th dynasty of Egypt, the dynasty Hatshepsut was born into around 1508 BCE, was arguably the most extraordinary ruling line the ancient world had ever seen. Soldiers and builders, visionaries and strategists, men and eventually one woman whose name would outlast all of them. The capital of this world was Thebes, the city we now call Luxor. Thebes straddled the Nile like a crown, East Bank devoted to the living, West Bank devoted to the dead. On the east, the temples of the god Amun rose at Karnak, enormous, endlessly added to, a sacred city built inside a city. On the west, rock-cut tombs and mortuary temples crowded the golden limestone cliffs, each one commissioned by a pharaoh who intended to live forever. The air in Thebes smelled of the river's seasonal mud, of incense burning in temple precincts, of bread baking in the early morning while the priests made their rounds. The god who mattered most in this world was Amun, merged in the new kingdom with the ancient sun god Ra to become Amun-Ra, king of all the gods, source of every legitimate claim to the double crown. His temple at Karnak was the wealthiest institution in Egypt. His priests were among the most powerful men in the kingdom. And the pharaoh, whoever that person happened to be, was understood to be Amun's chosen child on earth. Or his daughter, though that particular idea was about to be tested in ways no one in Thebes had anticipated. Hatshepsut's father was Thutmose I, a warrior king who had pushed Egypt's borders north to the Euphrates River and south to the fourth cataract of the Nile, bringing back extraordinary wealth and a reputation that bordered on legendary. He was fierce and beloved, and in Hatshepsut's later inscriptions, clearly idealized. She adored him. What we can reasonably infer from the evidence, from the way she would invoke his name her whole life, from the care she took to link her own building projects explicitly to his, is that the feeling was mutual. He saw in his daughter something worth seeing. Egypt in those years glittered with possibility. And a girl was growing up in the palace at Thebes, watching how a kingdom was run, quietly noting everything. The person who pays that kind of attention usually does something with it. She did. Her childhood is largely lost. She left no diary, no letters, and what survives of her own written record was created in adulthood to serve political purposes. But the shape of her early life is clear enough from what we know of the royal court of Thebes. And what we know is this: it was a world of extraordinary privilege and extraordinary narrowness simultaneously. Imagine a compound of painted stone halls, columned courtyards open to the blue sky, the constant movement of scribes and priests and minor officials managing the machinery of a great state. A child like Hatshepsut would have had her own household, nurses, servants, tutors, her own dedicated attendants from the time she could walk. Royal daughters of the 18th dynasty received a serious education. They learned to read and write in hieroglyphics. They learned mathematics, religious texts, the ritual calendar, which festivals required what offerings, which gods needed what performances, what sequence of rites kept the cosmos properly ordered. This was not ornamental knowledge. In a world where religion and governance were the same system, it was practical training. Hatshepsut also grew up with a formal religious title that carried real weight: God's wife of Amun. The holder of this role was understood to be ritually married to Amun himself. She participated in sacred ceremonies at Karnak, performed offerings that were otherwise the exclusive domain of the pharaoh, wielded genuine influence through the temple economy. It was power, clearly, though carefully contained within the framework of wifely devotion. Hatshepsut was learning from the inside how that framework operated and where its limits were. Her marriage to Thutmose II, her half-brother, took place when she was still young, likely around age 12, following the practice of royal intermarriage that concentrated the bloodline and the claim to divinity in a narrow circle. It was a political arrangement, not a romantic one. Thutmose II was not a healthy man. The historical record suggests he was unwell through much of his reign and died relatively young, leaving behind only one child with Hatshepsut, a daughter named Neferure, and no son to inherit. When Thutmose II died around 1479 BCE, the throne passed to an infant boy named Thutmose III, born to a lesser wife of the household named Iset. The new pharaoh was approximately 2 years old. Hatshepsut became regent. She had her father's blood, her husband's crown, and a child on the throne beside her. She had years of observation stored behind her eyes, and a network of loyal officials who had served her family for decades. She had the trust of the Amun priesthood, the most powerful religious institution in Egypt, and the title of God's wife to make that trust legible. She had everything she needed except the one thing she was not supposed to claim. For the first few years of her regency, she appears to have behaved conventionally. a queen managing affairs on behalf of a boy who couldn't yet read. The inscriptions from this period show her in the traditional female role, the proper shape the world had always expected her to occupy. And then, something shifted. Something the record doesn't explain. She decided it wasn't enough. Before we follow Hatshepsut into the moment she claimed the crown, it's worth sitting for a moment with what she was claiming. Because being pharaoh was not simply a political role. It was not a job in any sense we would recognize. To be pharaoh of Egypt was to inhabit a specific kind of divine body, and that body came with obligations that reached into every hour of every day. The pharaoh was understood to be Horus made flesh. The great myth at the center of Egyptian kingship told of Osiris, rightful ruler of the world, murdered by his brother Set, eventually avenged by his son Horus, who became king in his father's place. Every living pharaoh was Horus. When the pharaoh died, he became Osiris. This was not metaphor in the way we might use the word. It was theological reality, refreshed with each new reign, carved on temple walls, enacted in ritual, maintained through the daily labor of thousands of priests across the length of the Nile Valley. The pharaoh's coronation was understood not as the creation of a king, but as the revealing of one, the moment when the divine Ka, the essential spiritual force of kingship that had passed through every pharaoh since the beginning, entered the new ruler's body and made him something beyond human. By the new kingdom, the king was also the son of Amun-Ra, the sun. Priests maintained the story, carved in stone at multiple temples, including Hatshepsut's own Deir el-Bahri, that Amun had personally fathered the pharaoh by visiting the queen in a divine visitation. The child born from that visit was not merely of royal blood, he was of divine blood. With this divine status came a burden of ritual that was daily and absolute. The pharaoh was, in theory, the high priest of every god in Egypt. Every morning, in every major temple in the land, the daily service was carried out in his name. A priest entering the innermost sanctuary before dawn would break the clay seal on the shrine, open the wooden doors, and reveal the god's statue. Then bathe it, anoint it with perfumed oil, dress it in fresh linen, present it with offerings of food and drink and burning incense. 3 times a day, every day, in hundreds of temples, for as long as the pharaoh reigned. Every element of the pharaoh's physical appearance was also theological. The double crown, white and red combined, represented the union of Upper and Lower Egypt. The cobra at the forehead held the power of the sun's destructive heat. The crook meant ruler and carried the old association with magic. The flail declared the pharaoh the shepherd of the people, and the false beard, braided and tied at the chin, identical to the beard worn by the god Osiris in every statue and painting across Egypt, was the signal that the king carried within him the seed of resurrection, the promise that what ended would begin again. Hatshepsut knew all of this as intimately as she knew her own face. She had grown up moving through a world built from these symbols. She had performed the rituals, she had made the offerings, she had held the crook. She knew what the beard meant. She put it on, and she stood in the role it created. Not because she was confused about who she was, but because she was entirely clear. Sometime around the 7th year of Thutmose III's nominal reign, perhaps 1473 BCE, Hatshepsut crossed a threshold that had never been crossed in quite this way before. She declared herself pharaoh. No one knows precisely how it happened. Hatshepsut left no personal account of her reasoning, and the records that survive are largely the official inscriptions she commissioned afterward, which present her assumption of the throne as self-evident, divinely mandated, and correct. This silence at the center of the story is one of its most significant qualities. We have the before, and we have the after. The moment of decision itself is gone. What we do know is that Thutmose III was not removed. He was not deposed or exiled. He continued to hold the title of pharaoh throughout her reign, his name appearing on official documents alongside hers. Hatshepsut was co-ruler, but she was the dominant one, the figure who built, who directed, who decided. Some modern scholars, including those at the History Channel and Britannica, have suggested she may have made this move to protect the throne from a rival faction. That declaring herself co-pharaoh may have been, paradoxically, the most politically stable solution available. Whether that's accurate is contested. Hatshepsut herself offered a different explanation, and she had it carved everywhere. She said the gods chose her. At the temple of Karnak and in the painted colonnades of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, the divine birth narrative ran in full. Amun had come to her mother Ahmose in a divine visitation, disguised as Thutmose I, and the child born from that sacred union was Amun's own daughter. Priests announced that the oracle of the god had confirmed it, and Hatshepsut had an inscription carved that attributed to Amun himself, in the god's own voice, words that welcomed her to the throne. Daughter, favorite, king of Upper and Lower Egypt, taking possession of the two lands. She also made herself look the part. Across her monuments, she appeared in the full male regalia of the pharaoh, broad-shouldered, muscled, wearing the double crown, wearing the false beard, carrying the crook and flail. Her image was that of a king. Modern scholars are careful to emphasize that this was not deception. There were simply no existing conventions in Egyptian art for depicting a woman with this level of royal authority. The visual language of the pharaoh was male. To claim the pharaoh's role was to use that language. The interesting detail is that in her written texts, her inscriptions, her dedications, her personal voice, Hatshepsut often referred to herself in feminine forms. Daughter, her, she. The image was male. The voice was hers. This is the contradiction that defines her. She inhabited the only shape the world offered, while refusing to disappear inside it. She was the pharaoh, and she was Hatshepsut simultaneously, and she spent 20 years making sure that both of those things were understood. That is its own kind of courage. Not the courage of defiance exactly, but the courage of insisting that two truths can occupy the same body at once. In ancient Egypt, a pharaoh's legitimacy was proved not through words alone, but through what they built. The monuments you raised were your argument to the gods, your claim, made permanent in granite and limestone, that you had been here and had mattered. By this measure, Hatshepsut made one of the most overwhelming arguments in Egyptian history. She was one of the most prolific builders Egypt ever produced. Under her direction, construction projects unfolded throughout Upper and Lower Egypt. Temples, shrines, obelisks, statues, chapels, an entire temple carved from living rock at Beni Hassan, dedicated to a lioness goddess named Pakhet. She restored the precinct of the goddess Mut at Karnak, which had fallen into neglect during the Hyksos period. She contributed extensively to Karnak itself, the Red Chapel, the 8th pylon, offering chapels that still stand in partial form today. And she erected the obelisks. Obelisks in ancient Egypt were understood as petrified rays of the sun, physical statements of the solar link between the pharaoh and Ra. To raise the tallest obelisks in the world at the entrance to Karnak was to say, in the most public possible way, I am chosen. The sun has declared it. Under her direction, twin obelisks of pink Aswan granite were quarried at the great stone beds in the south, loaded onto enormous barges and transported by river to Thebes, each one approximately 30 meters tall and weighing over 300 tons. Their pyramidions, the pointed tips, were sheathed in electrum, an alloy of gold and silver, so that when the morning sun first touched them, they blazed with a light that could be seen from miles across the Theban plain. One of those obelisks still stands at Karnak today. It has been there for 3,400 years. Nearly 30 meters of pink granite etched with her name and her devotion to Amun. It is currently the second tallest ancient obelisk still standing anywhere on Earth, and the tallest remaining in Egypt. It has survived invasions, floods, earthquakes, and the deliberate attempt to erase everything associated with the woman who commissioned it. Later, she ordered a second pair to mark her 16th year of rule. One cracked during quarrying and was abandoned in the rock at Aswan, where it still lies today. The unfinished obelisk, a ghost of something that was meant to be, lying half-formed in the granite bed, an accidental record of exactly how obelisks were made. But the masterpiece, the monument that later archaeologists would call one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world, was her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. Djeser-Djeseru, the Holy of Holies. It was built into the great natural amphitheater of the limestone cliffs on the west bank of the Nile, directly across the river from Karnak. 3 massive colonnaded terraces rose one above the other, connected by gently sloping ramps, each terrace fronted by rows of square columns and opening inward to courts, and shrines, and eventually to the innermost sanctuary, carved directly from the living rock. The temple faced east, aligned precisely with Karnak, so that during the annual beautiful festival of the valley, the statue of Amun could be brought by ceremonial barge across the Nile, travel up the long causeway, and enter the sanctuary, the god coming to visit the house of his daughter, the circle closing. The walls of Djeser-Djeseru were covered in painted reliefs. The divine birth story, the expedition to Punt, scenes of Hatshepsut in full royal regalia presenting offerings to gods, receiving the crook and flail, standing at the prow of the eternal world. The entrance was once lined with frankincense trees, their roots carefully wrapped and carried across the sea from a distant shore, planted in shallow soil between the stone columns, living, breathing, green against the gold. Evidence that the world beyond Egypt's borders was open, and that the Pharaoh had reached out and gathered something from it. What we build is what we believe we deserve. Hatshepsut built as though she had no doubt at all. In the 9th year of her reign, approximately 1471 BCE, around halfway through her time as pharaoh, Hatshepsut sent an expedition to the land of Punt. Punt was a place of almost mythological significance in Egyptian culture. Known as the God's Land, it was the source of Egypt's finest incense, of exotic woods and precious metals and live animals impossible to obtain at home. Expeditions to Punt had been undertaken by earlier dynasties, but the route had lapsed into disuse for generations before Hatshepsut revived it. She sent a fleet of ships across the Red Sea, the expedition immortalized in the painted reliefs of Deir el-Bahri, where every stage of the journey was recorded in extraordinary detail. The reliefs show the Egyptian envoy arriving on an unfamiliar shore. The local chief, Pharaoh, and his wife Atiya come forward in welcome. The Egyptians spread out trade goods, beads, axes, wine, and receive back something far more valuable: quantities of incense resin, 31 living myrrh trees with their roots carefully wrapped for transport, ebony logs, ivory, gold, precious stones, and live animals including baboons, dogs, cattle, and leopard skins. The inscription recording the haul reads like a catalogue of wonder. Fragrant woods and fresh myrrh trees and pure ivory and green gold and eye cosmetics and apes and skins of the southern panther and natives and their children. The ships returned so heavily laden that, according to the reliefs, they rode low in the water. The living myrrh trees were replanted in the gardens of Djeser-Djeseru and at Karnak, where they would grow and supply incense for the god Amun for years to come. A pharaoh who sent living trees across the sea to be planted in a god's courtyard was not simply conducting commerce. She was claiming that the whole world was Egypt's garden. That, under her reign, the distant places were not distant at all. This matters because of what Hatshepsut could not do. She could not lead armies. Warfare was the exclusive domain of male pharaohs. Campaigns were depicted as physical, bodily acts of conquest, the king personally striking down the enemy, his arm raised, the mace connecting with the skull. It was a ritual as much as a military reality, and it was male in its grammar. Hatshepsut appears to have accepted this constraint. She is depicted in reliefs as a sphinx crushing enemies, and there are hints of small military campaigns, but she built her reign on something else entirely. She built it on trade, on temples, on the living trees breathing in the god's courtyard, and on the evidence she left carved into stone, that peace can be a form of power, that a country can be made magnificent without blood, that the ships coming home laden with myrrh and ebony and 31 trees in baskets could be, in their way, as triumphant as any army returning from a war. Here is where the story becomes less monumental. Here is where the mortar between the stones shows. Senenmut had been a man of no particular standing. Born in a village near Thebes, the son of a local official whose name appears nowhere in the important records. He entered royal service through channels that are not fully clear and was appointed tutor to Hatshepsut's daughter, Neferura, a role that brought him into close and regular contact with the Queen Pharaoh herself. He was good at his work, and then he was given more work. He became chief steward, then overseer of all royal works. Then, over the course of Hatshepsut's reign, the holder of scores of official titles, a concentration of formal power in a single non-royal individual almost without precedent in Egyptian history. He oversaw the quarrying, transport, and raising of Hatshepsut's great obelisks at Karnak. He is credited with the design or supervision of Djeser-Djeseru itself. He moved through the highest levels of Egyptian governance as though he had always belonged there, which he had not. He also had 2 tombs prepared for himself, which was unusual, evidence of significant wealth. One was never finished. The other was carved into the rock directly below Hatshepsut's temple, so close that he would spend eternity in her shadow. It contained something remarkable, the earliest known astronomical ceiling in a non-royal Egyptian tomb, decorated with constellations and planets in a style previously reserved for kings. He also placed a small image of himself behind a door jamb in the inner sanctuaries of Djeser-Djeseru, invisible to visitors, hidden when the door was open, but present, permanently close to her in the most sacred space of her eternal house. Whether Hatshepsut and Senenmut were lovers is a question Egyptologists have been asking for decades, and the answer remains: we genuinely do not know. There is a piece of graffiti found in a workman's hut near Deir el-Bahri that some scholars have interpreted as a satirical sexual image of a pharaoh and a common man. Its meaning and attribution are disputed, and many Egyptologists find the identification uncertain. Senenmut never married, unusual for a man of his social position, as scholar Kara Cooney has observed. But whether this points to a relationship with Hatshepsut or to something else entirely cannot be established from the available evidence. Britannica takes the straightforward position that no firm evidence supports the claim. What we can say is that he mattered to her. The privileges she granted him, the tombs, the astronomical ceiling, the image behind the door, were not routine. They were personal. He disappeared from the historical record around the 16th year of her reign, several years before she died. His sarcophagus was quarried and prepared but never used. What happened to him is not known. His name was attacked after his death. By whom and for what reason are both unclear. The small, dark room at the center of every great reign is the person who helped make it possible. The one whose loyalty was both professional and, in some way we can no longer see clearly, personal. They are almost never fully known. They almost never survive the archive. We have his astronomical ceiling. We have his image behind the door. That may be all we get. Hatshepsut died around 1458 BCE, when she was approximately 50 years old. She had held the double crown for roughly 20 years. Thutmose III, who had served alongside her the entire time, who had commanded her armies and grown from an infant into one of the most formidable military minds Egypt had ever produced, took the throne as sole pharaoh and ruled for 30 more years, extending Egypt's empire further than any king before or after him. And then, toward the end of his long reign, something extraordinary and calculated happened. The record of Hatshepsut began to disappear. Systematically, methodically. Her statues were pulled down. Thousands of fragments from hundreds of statues, smashed and buried in pits near Deir el-Bahri, their faces turned to the earth. Her name was chiseled from inscriptions throughout Egypt. Her images were hacked from temple walls. Her cartouche, the oval frame that enclosed a pharaoh's name, the container of their eternal identity, because the Egyptians believed that a name spoken and recorded was a name alive, was cut away from every surface it could be found on. She was removed from the official king lists. Successors looking back at the record would find a clean gap where 20 years had been, as though they had never happened. For generations, the Egyptologists who first examined this destruction assumed it was an act of vengeance. Thutmose III finally punishing the woman who had, in their telling, usurped his throne and stolen the decades that were rightfully his. The theory was satisfying in its neatness. It had anger in it, and anger makes a clean story. But the clean story is probably wrong. More recent scholarship, including the analysis offered by Egyptologist Donald Redford and accepted by Britannica and most academic institutions, suggests something more cold-blooded than revenge. Thutmose III wanted the succession to read without interruption from his grandfather to his father to himself. A female pharaoh in the middle of that sequence was a problem of precedent, not a problem of hatred. He was not erasing a person. He was erasing an example. And yet here is the thing that his precision could not prevent. In the dark places, behind door jambs, in the recesses of shrines the public never entered, in small alcoves no one thought to check, a few traces of Hatshepsut remained. Her name survived here and there, overlooked or perhaps deliberately spared by workers who understood that to erase a name was to kill a soul, and who chose was to kill the person twice. Once in the name and once in the person was to kill the person twice. Once in the body, once in the soul. If Thutmose III understood this, and he lived in a world where everyone understood it, then what he attempted was not merely political. It was total. It almost worked. For 3,000 years she was forgotten. Almost. But not completely. And not forever. The things we try hardest to erase are the things that come back most insistently. As though erasure itself is a kind of preservation, marking the shape of what was lost by the violence of the wound. She came back through a tooth. In 1903, the British archaeologist Howard Carter, who would later discover the intact tomb of Tutankhamun, excavated a modest, undecorated tomb in the Valley of the Kings, designated K4 60. Inside were two mummies. One lay in a coffin inscribed for Sitra In, Hatshepsut's royal wet nurse. The other, a woman lying on the floor with one arm bent over her chest in the traditional posture of royalty, had no coffin, no inscription, no name. Nobody paid her much attention. She lay there for more than a century, largely forgotten, in someone else's tomb. Then, in 2007, Egyptologist Zahi Hawass led a team using CT scanning technology to attempt the identification of several unidentified royal female mummies. During this work, they found a wooden box in the storerooms of the Cairo Museum, a box bearing Hatshepsut's cartouche, containing her preserved internal organs. And inside the box, carefully wrapped by the ancient embalmers who had apparently been unwilling to simply discard it during the mummification process, was a single molar tooth, broken at the root. The tooth was scanned. The unidentified woman from KV60 was scanned. The molar fit precisely, root and socket, every dimension, into a gap in the mummy's upper jaw. The woman lying on the floor of the tomb, forgotten for a century and silent for 3,500 years, was Hatshepsut. She was approximately 50 years old when she died. She had diabetes, which the analysis of her bones and teeth suggested. She had poor dental health. She was overweight. She died, the evidence indicates, of bone cancer. Slowly, naturally, without violence. She had grown old. She had been ill. She had died as the bodies of ordinary people die, in quiet suffering, in the gradual fading. No murder, no dramatic end, just a life that eventually completed itself, as all lives do. Her obelisk at Karnak is still there. Nearly 30 meters of pink Aswan granite, etched with her name and her devotion to Amun, it rises above the ruined columns and scattered stone blocks of everything else that time has consumed. Its tip no longer blazes with electrum. Its twin has fallen and lies in pieces near the sacred lake. But it stands. Thutmose III, near the end of his reign, had this obelisk enclosed, behind a stone wall, hidden from sight, rendered invisible within the complex he was building around it. He couldn't have it removed. The engineering problem was simply too large, so he walled it in. And then, centuries later, the wall fell, or was dismantled, or was swallowed by time, and the obelisk was revealed again, standing exactly where it had always been. She could not be moved, not while she lived, and not after. If you subscribe to Sleepable History, you help us tell more stories like this one, long, quiet, careful journeys into lives that almost disappeared. We'd be so glad to have you with us. A woman who was not supposed to rule had nevertheless ruled, for 20 years in peace, building temples and sending ships across dangerous seas and planting living trees in sacred courtyards. She had worn the beard of Osiris and called herself Son of Ra and spoken her name in feminine forms in her own inscriptions, because she was two things at once and she refused to pretend otherwise. She had been erased from the king lists, buried on someone else's floor, and found 3.5 millennia later by a single molar that fit precisely into the jaw of a woman no one had thought important enough to name. She lives as long as her name is spoken. The Egyptians understood something permanently true about that. Her name is Hatshepsut. She was Pharaoh of Egypt, foremost of noble women, daughter of Amun, sole ruler of the two lands, and she held the double crown with intelligence and ambition and the peculiar courage of someone who understood exactly what she was doing was impossible. Still, she did it. Nameless for 3 millennia, but not gone. Hidden behind stone walls, but not destroyed. Returned to us in the end, in the form of a tooth, a cartouche, and a single obelisk that stood where it had always stood, waiting for the wall to fall. The river is wide and dark. The desert beyond Thebes is cooling. At Karnak, as it has for 3,400 years, the pink granite rises above the ruins into the quiet night air, still massive, at rest. Let yourself rest too. You know her name.